guys, welcome back to Just Advisor Things. We are just doing an interview today with Jim Streisel. He is an advisor. Where are you an advisor? I actually didn't ask.
I'm at Carmel High School in Carmel, Indiana.
Carmel High School in Carmel, Indiana. Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into advising, how long you've been doing it, and what publications you advise.
I have been teaching at Carmel High School my entire teaching career, which started in 1995. So if you do the math, that's 29. This is my 29th year at Carmel. I actually have a journalism education degree and an English degree. So I started at Carmel primarily in English, and then I sort of weaned myself into the program that is the journalism program here at Carmel. Kind of part of a fantastic, an already established fantastic program with a couple of other veterans of journalism. So that was a good situation to be in because I got to learn by doing. I was the associate advisor for a while of the Highlight, which is what I advise now. But I also advised a kind of a short-lived magazine that was called The Prerogative, which we have since absorbed into the Highlight, and it now has become our thematic magazine, which is called The Acumen. So over that time, I've really taught and advised just about everything there is here. I've taught a lot of intro newspaper. I teach Radio 1 and 2 right now. We have an FM radio station here at the school. I've taught intro photo and visual journalism, and then advised the Highlight staff and the Acumen staff, and then little things in between. But I've done a little bit of everything.
Got it. I think I've actually seen your magazine. It must have been probably 2017, 2018. I was at a JEA convention, and when my students brought it up to me, and they were like, "This is the best one we've ever seen," and I was like, "Yeah, they're really great."
Yeah, the
so
kids do
they definitely
really good
were
work.
inspired by it.
What's interesting is, I just saw that they announced the Pacemaker finalists for news magazines. We went fully online as of last year. So last year was our first year being fully online. So we're no longer part of that news magazine side of it, but we still do a lot of interesting design work and stuff. We're just applying it now toward the web, which is sort of, from a guy like me, the technology has passed me by a long time ago. After doing this for 29 years, there's no way I can keep up. But I know journalism, so I know it doesn't matter what the tool is. My product isn't that publication. My product is kids, so I'm just there to provide them opportunities to learn.
Yeah. Do you kind of miss it though? Like when they came out, were you kind of like, "Oh, that was us"?
There's part of it I miss. The tangible nature of it, the smell of the papers in the hallway, the excitement when kids are out distributing the paper. But I don't miss the late work nights. We don't do them anymore. And we never really were late anyway, but we don't do any work nights now because everything's on a rotating cycle. I don't miss paying those bills.
Yeah, paper's expensive, especially these days.
And as time went along, we would end up with a lot of extra copies of the paper, and my kids didn't like, and I too don't like, the sort of the environmental impact of that. What does that mean for the environment? And so we, when we were told that we were going to go online, and if we didn't, we were going to have to figure out a different way to fund it. I had my kids do a big brainstorming session, and we took a couple of days really to talk about the merits of online versus print and so on. And it was my kids that came out on the other end of it in favor of online. And the top thing was the environment. They were worried about that. One of the benefits they liked for print was that they liked the tangible side of it. They liked it, but they realized that was more for them than for the readers. They had a thing that they could put in their portfolio, but if you can make a digital portfolio, it's just fine. They just missed that bit, but they were like, well, that's a little selfish for as much money and environmental impact as possible. So
and it's so hard too when you distribute and you have them read it for 10 minutes at lunch and then they're all over the floor, and it's like, okay, no one actually really cares about holding on to this, like you said, but versus the staff.
There's a moment, there is merit to it, and I can't remember who told me this, but it was at a convention or at a workshop or something. And they said, you know what, with print though, you distribute it like that, you at least know that even if it's just for 5 minutes, everyone in the school is thinking about this one thing. With online, you don't necessarily have that same immediate impact. And then there's also questions about marketing and stuff like that. It's a little harder when you don't have a tangible product. I'm not throwing computers at people, so if you don't have that tangible product to hand people, it's a little bit of a tougher market to be like, oh yeah, we have this great product over here. So, but that was another issue that they thought about. My kids did, and they thought, well, it's not insurmountable. We just need to figure out.
It's just a different challenge. Yeah. That
And
makes
for
sense.
me as a teacher, well, then bring it on. I mean, if my goal is to give kids opportunities to learn, well, then here's a new thing that we can learn, and let's try it.
And that's a trend we're seeing too, is moving to fully online. And I think early on, when like web magazines, web for school came out, there was a lot of hesitation because of that. Like people didn't know how to get the student body to actually go to the website, which valid concern. But I think it's more and more common now than ever.
We were way ahead of the game in a lot of ways because we started highlight.org in 1996. In 1995, there were only 20,000 websites in the country.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's way earlier than I thought you were even gonna say.
Yeah, in 96, there were about 250,000. Now there are almost 2 billion websites, give or take, on any given day of websites that there are. And we were there since 96. And so we've always had a web offering. Now we can really focus on it. Now we can really think about social media and different multimedia tools and other things that we can do to tell stories, which is awesome, especially because we don't have this print publication to worry about anymore. My kids even realized they were spending a lot of time, maybe an undue amount of time, worrying about like page design.
Right.
Like, during production week, it was literally just the editors who were just tweaking and making, and the rest of the staff wasn't doing quite as much. And so now that we're online, it's like the full staff has stuff to do all the time, because we just have this rotating series of deadlines, and then we can publish things when they're ready to be published, not because the print
is due tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I love that you really gave them the autonomy to make that decision. Like they have that buy-in because they did the brainstorming.
I had to I've done that over my career for a bunch of times. Like I have to sometimes remind myself, it's not my publication. It's not my choice to make. I remember this years ago, our school, for some inexplicable reason, had blocked Facebook. And I was sort of up in arms. Oh, we need to figure out why that is, because we had a robust Facebook following, and we wanted. I finally came in to my kids. Oh, we need to do this, and they were like, "It's not really fine." And then it kind of made me think, "Oh, this is not a battle that you want to fight." All right, I'll step back, and because you had other things that you wanted to do, and that's fine. Like just because I want to do it, I mean, I'm good at helping kids steer them in the right direction, but ultimately it is their publication to have. And I think these kinds of conversations, the reason we had that conversation is because once we found out we weren't going to be funded, it was 2 years ago, and we were being it was funded but truncated. We were not doing the full press run. We were making a limited number, but it was like to figure out a stopgap until we figured it out. I came in, and the editors at the time saw them on the board, and they were brainstorming ways of raising money to do the paper. And it was things like, we're going to do a bake sale, a car wash. We're going to go find a wealthy benefactor who's going to, we're going to go into the school board and demand that we get. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, none of this is journalism.
Right.
Look, I'm all for raising money, but if we're going to raise money, then I think we need to do it the way journalists would do it. So you're selling advertisements, you're doing maybe a PR style, a fundraising event, something like that. That's fine, but I'm not selling cookies and cakes on Saturday. I'm not washing anybody's car. I barely wash my car.
Right.
So
you'll come to the car wash.
And that was the moment where I was like, okay, we need to figure this out. And so, yeah, I thought, honestly, the kids were kind of incensed and were up in arms and were ready to be, we're going to figure out a way to make this print thing work. And sure enough, we came out the other end and they saw the data. I mean, it was all spreadsheets and stuff. I wrote an article about it. But it's all, they came out the other side and they were in favor of online. And frankly, I think it surprised them too.
Yeah, but what a great exercise. I mean, that's what mainstream media newspapers are doing too, evaluating the cost analysis of their readership and is it worth it to print anymore? And a lot of them are deciding also web only, and it's kind of heartbreaking as a paper person, but I get it.
Yeah, I think we were unusual because I think a lot of small schools, I've taught a lot of workshops, and I tell some staffs that are really small schools, like it may be their only option to go online because it is so inexpensive to be able to do good journalism and not have a lot of resources to do so. We were unusual in that we have a really big staff. I mean, we have a school of 5,400 kids. I have 67, 68 kids on my staff currently. The fact that we went fully online, I think, was the thing that made, and I'll tell you, I got a lot of positive feedback from other staffs who I know were also really strong. I think it was, I think they were almost waiting for like permission.
Right. Like, can you do it? Can we do
this? Because we've always done it this way for so long. Like, how long do we keep this thing going? And it's not, again, not to disparage those who still do that. I think there is merit to it. I think there's value to it. It just wasn't feasible for us anymore.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. You have a huge staff, you said. So is that a Convergent media staff, or is that just the news staff?
So in our school, again, we have 5,400 kids. So that, I mean, luckily we have a lot of kids to pull from, right? And so in our, what we call the Greyhound Media Network, it's 4 programs. There's mine, which is the news program. There's the yearbook, which my friend Claire Burke advises. We have a television station, CHTV, which my friend Brandy Eskojic advises. And then we have an FM radio station, JEA, my friend Dominic James advises. And so loosely, we are the Greyhound Media Network. But individually, we all sort of advise our own silo. Mm-hmm. That being said, now that we're fully online, or obviously with social media and things like that, that line is becoming far more gray. Mm-hmm. Like there used to be a distinct difference between what radio was, TV, and all that. But now, like we're online, and I have kids who want to do a podcast, or I have students doing video. And we are, but I also encourage them to maybe try to reach out to some of the other kids in the department who maybe know how to do that thing better. And mm-hmm. let's figure out a way to collaborate with some of the programs here. We're all doing the same job. We just have different tools to do it. So we're not in competition with one another. We all have a distinct, different way of telling a story.
Right.
And so I think it's important for us to sort of as a department always remember that we don't, we're not trying to get the scoop on somebody else.
Right.
Like it's perfectly fine if television has a story because that lends itself to video, and then we have maybe a written story that gives you a little more nuance and detail in that story. We can work hand in hand and make really great coverage. Ultimately, the goal for the students, at least, is to make sure the readers and listeners and viewers of high school get the information that they need.
Yeah, exactly. And they can all link to each other, which is like cross promotion and great.
Yeah. And I'd love to see more of it. I'd love to see even more of it. Like with the podcast thing, I told my students, I go, look, you need to find a radio kid who knows how to use that equipment and wouldn't mind like working with you. Interview. You can go find the sources and bring them in and do the interview part. Somebody can help you with the technical side of that, the recording part, and then we can help edit it together, and then we can figure that out together.
Right.
So this can live. You could live in both locations. You can live on the WHJE website. You can live on ours. Why not?
Yeah, man. Well, that sounds like such a robust program. Which obviously you have a huge school, so like you have the bandwidth in terms of a number of students to have such a robust program. But I think a lot of advisors are by themselves and doing it all. So it sounds really nice to have a team of 3 other teachers that are also advising student publications. So how did that come to be? Like, do you all have full schedules of journalism, or do you teach other things?
We do, but the thing that got me think when you said yes, silo, I see that a lot, and I guess maybe that's a good segue because that's one of the reasons why I took on this role with JEA. I've been to, I had gone to conventions for my whole career, still do conventions. I teach at workshops, I meet other teachers, and it's so nice to sit and have conversation with other journalism teachers who get it, who do what you do. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in like PLC, professional learning community meetings, and they just stick you in with the art department or with industrial tech because they don't know what to do with you. Like,
or English or
So gosh, it was probably 15 years ago, part of the JEA, a friend of mine, Mark Newton, and I started, it was a national journalism PLC. We just thought, what, we're in the same boat. We're being asked to do these things, this DeFore method PLC, but we're and we believed in the idea of like gathering data and having similar assessment tools, and then being able to talk about these. How your kids are doing so much better on that than mine? Well, we couldn't have it because we didn't teach the same thing. Even in my department, we weren't teaching the same thing. One was teaching radio, and one was teaching news. So it's not apples to apples. It's apples to similar apples, but it's not the same. And so we started this National Journalism PLC, and we did it digitally. It's kind of before Zoom was the thing. And we just found a kind of a core group of teachers that we started with. And we created assessment tools, and we measured them. And there were teachers from all over the country. And then we turned it into a model where at like JEA conventions, teachers could sign up in almost like a pre-convention workshop. We'd come in and we'd teach them the model, and then they could get in small groups and teams, and they could make their own little PLCs. And it worked for a long time, which was cool. But yeah, being in a silo can be hard when you're the only one doing what you do because nobody gets it. Like administrators, like I'll hear my yearbook advisor talk about like scheduling, group photos like a year in advance.
Yeah.
And then some administrator will just come in and not even look at the calendar, schedule some major thing. And it's just like, what?
Yeah.
Why do
We
we have
had
a
a fire
calendar?
drill in the middle of yearbook distribution. And I was like, I have over $100,000 worth of yearbooks out here and you're going to do a fire drill? Like
Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
they don't get it. Yeah.
And so at the very least, just having somebody to play off of, to just sort of like, even if something goes well or goes wrong or something goes right, like just somebody to talk to say, this is the thing that we did. Isn't that cool? And they're like, oh yeah, it is. Because they know it, they get it, because they have kids that are doing the same things. It would be super hard to do it all by yourself.
Yeah. And that's
So,
actually why I started working as advisor, was because I saw in these Facebook groups, like there's such a need for resources, or not even the resources are out there. It's like, how do you get to them? Like a brand new advisor directing them there. And so that's how it started. It's evolved a lot since then, but I love the idea of the national PLC. I wish whatever happened with that, did it dissolve?
It just ran out of funding. It just, they moved in a different direction. I mean, it served its time. It was great. And so now I'm in this new role of the JEA curriculum specialist. And that just popped up on the Facebook feed. I'm not gonna lie. Like it popped up last spring. I looked at it and I was like, maybe, but no. And then I had the former yearbook advisor, here is now yearbook Valerie. She texted me. She's like, would be good for this. Oh, I twisted my arm. And so I applied and interviewed and then got that job. But it was new. And so it was like with Val Kibler, who's the president of JEA, and Veronica Purvis, who's the executive director of JEA. And it was just them kind of riffing a little bit about like, what do you see for this position? I don't know that they had it fully fleshed it out. The way I looked at it, maybe it's what got me the job, I don't know. But I said, you know what? Because they asked me this, the JEA is an extensive curriculum. It's awesome. It's like hundreds of lessons, fully vetted, objectives that are there, materials are linked. It's awesome. They said, what do you think about the curriculum? I said, it's awesome. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I am a brand new teacher coming into the classroom. Somebody's like, here, you're going to look at it, and then you're going to be like freaked out. Like, where do I even start? Right?
Yeah, I get that feedback all the time. It's the first thing I recommend, but they're like, but there's no scope and sequence. And I was like, well, every class is different, and it's really hard to, there's no day-by-day plan, So
that's where my role, I told him, I said, I think that what my role would be, and that's what I've tried to make it so far, it's still relatively new, but it is to be that liaison between that really awesome but overwhelming curriculum and like an everyday teacher in the classroom.
Right.
So it started with these weekly newsletters, and it's just every week my goal is to find something that's relatively current, that's going on in the news, and trying to time it with things that I might be doing in my classroom at the time. So like early in the year would be things like moments of news, information gathering, interviewing, inverted pyramid writing, staff organization. And then as the year progresses, we're gonna start looking at maybe some more deeper, like photography, design, and some of the things that you do like later in the semester. I'm trying to do a little thing. It's just sort of a quick, maybe even a bell ringer, like a small group activity. And then always I'm linking it to just one lesson on the JEA curriculum site that we're offering for free for everyone, even non-JEA members, for that week. And then I archive the old issues, and then so JEA members can get it and they can see the issues as well.
Yeah.
And then I always have a little spot in the corner, which is doing kind of what you're doing, which is to spotlight an advisor, to focus on somebody who is doing something cool in the classroom. We have a cool team builder or a bell ringer activity. And then one little chunk that's just like a quick style, one little thing. Because the thought was, if like when I go to conventions, I remember years ago, to some extent, it can be like an old boys club. You can go, and it's like the same people who have gone for 30 years.
Definitely feel that, yeah.
And I love it. Like I love, because you haven't seen these people.
Right, they're your friends.
Yeah, and just to go back to your idea, like journalism teachers get to talk to other journalism teachers. How cool is that? But then you see all those people with the first year, advisor badge, that blue badge. I was walking around with, maybe it was Nicole, but we were just like, oh my gosh, look a little lost. Like they look like they came. Like, that's cool. Like you managed to like go through whatever it takes to get you to this convention.
Mhm.
Now it's like, oh, what do we do? And so I thought about those people. Thought about those people who really want to come. They want to be part of it. They want to be engaged, but they just don't know where to start. And so that's and so like Nicole and I that year, like we made it a goal. Like every time we would go into like the group advisor room and we'd see like a lone blue tagger,
Only
like,
new advisor.
we'd swarm in there and be like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And we'd introduce ourselves. And but this is a little like that. I think it's that, and it's just the start. Like I'm going to be at the national convention in Boston this fall, and we're hoping to offer some curriculum help there as well that I will be a big part of. I think we haven't fleshed it all out yet, but in my head, I almost see it like to some extent like on sites where kids can come in and get critiques. Like maybe it's advisors that can come in and they can just, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and we can have a half hour to talk through. Maybe it'll be a Thursday pre-convention workshop or something like that, where a bunch of advisors come in and we have a start. We haven't fleshed out all those details, but that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal, is to be able to sort of make what is great material, great offerings, make that accessible to new teachers, new to journalism teachers, like people that get like they've been teaching 20 years, but now they're like, oh, by the way, you're also the yearbook advisor. Well, what do I do?
Oh yeah, they've been teaching
like my
English forever, and they're a great
Yeah.
teacher, but they know nothing about photography. You know, like rightfully so. They can probably write a good caption, but it's just it's a wide skill set. So I love that. I mean, the majority of the questions that I get are about the curriculum specifically are, this looks great, I have no idea where to start, or how do I actually use it? You know, like putting it in action in the classroom with the planning and activities and stuff like that. So I love the initiative of getting it more in their hands.
Yeah, and it's you had said it earlier. It's like, oh, there's no scope and sequence, or I think that's actually one of my goals too. Is I'm hopefully down the road going to be working one-on-one with staffs or with advisors really, to help them create things like scope and sequence for their particular situation using the data curriculum guide. Because you might only have a 9-week course, or you might have a full year like we do. You might have kids for 4 years, and so what does that look like? There are materials there, but you can only provide so much detail before it gets even more overwhelming. So it's a matter of sort of moving those things around. And so one of the things we've talked about is even like if you signed up to do that, like I would maybe meet with you 2 or 3 times over the course of several months. And so the first time it would just be sort of like, when you write the program, and back it would be like, okay, here's some of the things that I've worked through on that. Let's talk about that. And maybe the third time is, okay, what questions do you have?
Yeah, I think that would be so helpful to new advisors because they're just in over their head, especially if they're doing multiple publications, though. You know, they're maybe teaching journalism 1, photojournalism, yearbook, and newspaper. And looking at the curriculum from a planning perspective, it's like I have to do 4 preps by myself and teach something different every single and produce publications. You know, it's not just the teaching, which I usually say, like, no shade to other subjects, but journalism is not the same. Like the production aspect is a beast of its own.
It can be. I mean, and even just there, time management is just one of those things that a lot of people, I've been a big proponent of that. I mean, I think that a lot of what we teach in journalism, by the way, is not necessarily journalism. I have always been a proponent of the idea that what we actually teach is transferable skills that happen to use the language of journalism.
Right.
Some programs are different than mine. In my case, most of my kids do not study journalism in college. Some do, and they're super well prepared. But they're in my program for some other reason. They want to work on deadlines. They want to build their people skills and talk to. They learn how to vet information and find out what's credible and what's not. They learn how to take big messy problems and break them into smaller, more manageable chunks. Like these are things that they're going to take with them wherever they go. Again, you just happen to use the language of journalism to do that. Right now, our school is in the process of looking at Polytechnic, which is great. But I constantly am telling the ones who are in charge of that, like, you can't just look at what we do in journalism as just a career path. Right. Knowing my kids the way that I do, to some extent, that might turn off some kids, thinking that that was the only reason to join the class, is it's a career path. Which, again, if kids are in it, they're going to find that they're very successful. but that's not sort of the focus of what we do. And I think that in electives in general, I think sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that you learn that are transferable to any skill. Even if they go and become a surgeon, which is like completely unrelated, they still need to know how to be able to write a professional email, for instance, you know? And so I feel like there's so many skills that like are
Yes.
underrated because like that's not the focus, but you
Right.
learn it along the way.
Oh, for sure. And you know, that all comes back to that conversation. I mean, it kind of, I went off on a tangent there, but that goes back to that idea of having a curriculum that can help support that. You know, yeah, you have to understand the subject. I mean, you do, but you also have to understand kids in general. How does
Right.
this work in your program? And yes, it can be a time commitment. It doesn't have to be. Like you can work smarter, not harder. And I hope that I can bring some of that to the table as well to help maybe alleviate some of those concerns that some advisors have.
Yeah.
There are some advisors that are, you know, it's hard for them to let go. It's hard for really anybody to do that. But there are times you can sort of figure that out and have a system in place that makes that happen. But if you don't know where to start and get
Yeah.
that
I
in
think
place, how do you even get beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, learning to delegate. I mean, we talk about teaching our kids all these things, but really, as an advisor, one of the best skills to learn is learning how to delegate and how to like really truly let go. And I always say, like, take your hand off the mouse. Like, don't
Yep.
do it for them. Really let them be the driver of their learning. And come in when you need to. Like, you know, don't just let things go to crap because you took no control. But
Right. I
yeah,
mean, it was hard for me early on teaching, so I can bring that experience too. But it's like having that thinking, oh, just do this, move, give me the mouse. Um, Now I really make a point of, even when I walk over, like my hands behind my back,
hmm
look at it, tell them something. You know, I give them maybe a little I'm a little devil's advocate, or I give them some advice. But now I'm trying to work with my management team about doing the same thing. Like,
hmm
don't let it all bottleneck to you.
right,
There's 60 some odd students on staff. If only two of you can post things, then that doesn't make any sense, because it's not efficient, it's not effective. You have to train people to do the things that you want them to do. And then you
hmm
need to be able to monitor that. I think about that, like we have our social media, and I'll say, you know, look, the job of the social media editor is not to do all of the social media. The job of the social media editor is to coordinate our social media efforts.
right,
And
manage.
so, yes, so you can have people covering all these events. Your job as the editor is to make sure that's happening. And if it's not, then you figure out why it's not happening and you solve that problem. But if you can't be 20 places at once, you know, so your social media at some point is just going to be limited because it's one person doing this thing. You've got to figure out a way to train people to do things do or not. That's a lot of work on the front end.
Yeah.
Boy, does that not make it easier as the year goes along.
Right, for sure. I mean, I always say like the more work you do in the beginning and in the beginning of your program, like if you're a new advisor, those first 3 or 4 years are really tough, especially taking over for someone else and the kids love them obviously and whatever. But the more structure and systems you put into place in the beginning, the easier the rest of the whole process is.
Oh,
So,
and I think along the way, and it gets back to the earlier conversation we have to empower your kids to be part of that conversation. They
right.
should have a say in what's going on.
Yeah.
So I'll have kids that'll say, you know, our staff isn't meeting deadlines. Okay, what happens when people don't meet a deadline? Well, nothing. You know, they get an extension, and then it ends up being me because I'm stuck on, because I'm the editor and I care and I want to do. Well, where's your advisor? What motivates your staff? You know, is it grades? All right, well then you need to get your advisor to be part of that. You need to propose it. You need to say, we want deadlines to be better. We know that people on the staff are motivated by grades. We need you to help by meeting out consequence of, you know, whatever that looks like in this deadline, and then hold true to that. Like, have a standard, hold to it. You know, my staff, we don't do extensions unless there are like extenuating circumstances.
Right.
Because
Because
once you
there's no
get
extensions
one,
in the real world. Like,
yeah, and once you get one, then you're going to get 5 or 10, and then all of a sudden, if you're an editor, like a news editor in sports, and you got 5 people who are all asking for extensions, and what's the point of a deadline? Like,
right.
what is even the point of a deadline? And you've already set the tone that says that and you can't bring it back.
Right.
So you have to be hard on it early. But those are the conversations that I don't know necessarily happen to a lot of advisors. They just union,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get burned out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's unfortunate. I don't know if the stat is still true, but when I started teaching, they told us something like 3 years was the average tenure of a
Yeah, and
journalism
that's
advisor.
what I heard when I started as well. And I just based on my hunch of my feelings on like the inquiries that I get, I feel like it's less than that even
I
now.
wouldn't be surprised.
Post
Yeah.
COVID, I feel like there's a lot of new teachers every year, understandably. And it's that overwhelm that they feel, I think, is understandable, but preventable, if they feel empowered and like equipped to be able to handle it. I mean, you've done this for so long. How do you not get burnt out and not be overwhelmed and build the machine to be well oiled?
Well, I will say that I have been doing it a long time, and I think doing things like this JEA gig now are ways to keep me engaged in the process. I still love my kids. I still love doing what we do. There is a lot of bureaucracy in schools right now that is frustrating and it's hard to take. And there's going to be a point at which I'm going to be like, it's time. It's time to move on. And I feel like I've earned that, and I'll be ready to go. And I got things I'm going to do. I'm still relatively young, and I got so I've got a few years where I want to do those things. But for now, yeah, it's finding new challenges. And one of the cool things about journalism is every day is different. Every story is different. Every tool is different. And that makes it interesting. When I taught English for those years, like after 4 or 5 years of teaching Romeo and Juliet, like,
Right.
I mean, I love the story, but come on, I mean, I can only read so many essays about Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
It just got to be monotonous, and it was harder to do. Now, yeah, it was 7 years or so. We went through curriculum adoption, and we'd find new books to read, a few new books, but it was still sort of the same all the time. And that, I think, if I had done that for 29 years, that probably would have been like time to move on. My sister was a teacher as well. That's why she moved to middle school librarian later in her career, just because she was getting burnt out teaching English all the time for high school. And so she finished her career doing that. For me, I like this part of it. I like that there's enough extra stuff, like the conventions that we get to go to. I teach workshops. My wife tells me that she's married to the only traveling teacher on the planet. Like, yeah. Because I do. I mean, I go to summer workshops, which for me are like a really geeky summer vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm teaching, I'm hanging out with like some of my best friends on the planet, and yeah, we're teaching all day, but we get to hang out at night. Going to conventions is awesome. I've seen a lot of the country because of that. But yeah, and then I get to play with stuff. I get to play with tools, and I've gotten better than myself, and I like that part. So that's the thing I think that keeps me going. And I'm not gonna lie, teaching in general, yeah, 2 months now in the summertime, or my holidays off. And not that I'm not doing stuff, but it keeps the year, it moves it around.
Manageable. Yeah. It sounds like you've also really found your community though. Like I think a lot of times advisors, especially if they're the only one on campus and they're doing it all themselves, it's hard to reach out. And the Facebook groups I think have helped. But I feel like there's really a lot of value in meeting other advisors and building real relationships with them.
And that's kind of where I would like to see this role here evolve, is to find ways to get folks like that into like-minded groups. I taught for the ASNE, they used to do a summer workshop for advisors, and it was lengthy. It was like 2 or 3 weeks. And they would bring in 3 advisors. I was one of the 3 that they brought in to teach these folks. And we had a little group, it was ASNE Missouri, and that became like a little friend group. Because they spent 2 weeks together. They actually did journalism together, ate together, they stayed in the hotel. And,
was it the Reynolds Institute?
It was the Reynolds Institute.
Okay, yeah. I did the one in Phoenix.
So then you get it, right? So you probably, I don't know if you're still in touch with the people that you did that with.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it was like we trauma bonded almost over those. Yeah,
but
it wasn't trauma, but it
so
was.
For me, it was teaching workshops. I would start teaching these. I got asked to teach these workshops. Excuse me, I teach these workshops, and I would meet these other advisors all over the country, and I just thought, this is awesome. And then we became friends because we had a lot in common, and they made me laugh, and we had similar other interests besides just journalism. those folks are some of my best friends today. Like, we have a text group that I get probably 10
Yeah.
texts a day from some of my friends who I've got a couple in California, one in Nebraska, one in a couple in Missouri. But I mean, they're awesome people. It's because of those experiences, like going to conventions, going to workshops, taking that time to sort of get to know people. I just hope that they're I guess my bigger picture item is like, we have all these tools, we have all these things that people can take advantage of. They just don't know maybe that they are there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of where I want to be. It's like to let people know, oh, did you know that you could do this? Or
Mm-hmm.
where there's a grant available for this, or you could go. I just taught at Michigan State this summer, and they had a whole track just for advisors.
Right.
Could stay in the dorms, and they took a class, and they could go then audit other classes that were being taught at the time, and then they'd always come back and have conversation, and just even that camaraderie is so important, because
Mm-hmm.
it makes you feel like you're not that violent. You're stuck.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, like it's really easy to look at the convention and look at everyone who kind of already has their friend group. It's like high school, like there's the clique and there's the people that have been doing it and their friends. And it can be hard as a new advisor to break into that. But, it is, I think, so important to like not getting burnt out and not having that overwhelm, because you have that support system, but also you learn from each other and, share, swap advice, that kind of stuff.
But imagine having that pre-convention workshop and it's just for advice. Right? So already you're in with 10 others,
right,
just like you, who come here for the very first time and never been here, and now all of a sudden you have 9 friends. Like,
yep.
You're going to see them in the hallways. You're going to see them at dinner, and you're going to strike up conversation, and you're going to know them. That's the key, right? Like, nobody likes being the new guy. It's gutsy to go by yourself,
yeah,
and be there. But then when you're there, it's like, I've been in that situation before.
mm-hmm.
Whether my wife will have a work event or something, and I'll go and I'll just sort of sit. I don't know anyone, and I don't know who to start up a conversation with. You have to provide moments where people have that opportunity to talk, and they have that opportunity to create that community. Who knows where it starts? And for us, it was that PLC thing.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So, so let's go back to talk a little bit about the position with JEA. I want to make sure that, hopefully people watch this, they go and they look at that, because I think it's so valuable. But you've done it, I think, like a couple of weeks now, into the school year, and you're doing a couple topics per week.
Yep.
How are you like balancing the yearbook side of things, the newspaper side of things? There's curriculums from yearbook publishers, and I think they get a lot of attention, but then there's these like beautiful newspaper kids that I feel like don't always get like all the resources. So that's another reason why I'm so glad that this kind of thing is coming out for teachers to help with that.
I mean, you're right. It is still relatively new. I got the job in early June. We had the summer to sort of flesh it out. I knew that I wanted to launch this thing early August. My first day as a teacher, first days for us were August 1st and 2nd, and we started that following week. So I sent out my intro newsletter then, and then I've been sending one a week on Sundays. I post them on Sundays. And I plan to do that all the way through. This is a 6-month gig with the option for them to renew it. So for now, it lasts through the first semester. And in terms of content, I think there are a lot of universal things that we deal with just in general as journalism teachers. And so I've been trying as much as I can to try to keep those topics relatively universal for now. So things like interviewing skills, or the elements of news. Like, just you should know those things regardless of what tool you're using to tell the story or what your medium is at the end. On that note, though, like, I've been trying to highlight different advisors, and I don't know if you can provide a link or something, but I have a Google form that JEA members. I'm really looking for JEA members to contribute to. And it's just a Google form, and ask them, like, what's your favorite bell ringer activity? What's your favorite team builder? I asked them to send me a headshot or a photo of them so I can jazz up the newsletter a little bit. But I want to highlight JEA members so that, again, it personalizes that experience. And so some of those are yearbook people, some of them are newspaper, some of them are both, broadcast people. I'm trying to think about places all around the country. I mean, full disclosure, like, I sent the thing out first, and of course all my friends started sending it because they love me and they want to be helpful. But I'm hoping to start getting some new faces, and I'm starting to see that, come in. I think I've got maybe 40 or 50 responses so far, which is awesome because I have
Great. Yeah.
20 newsletters to do for the semester. But you know, the more the merrier. I mean, bring it in, bring it on. And so that's a big part of it, is just trying to get those different viewpoints and faces. And like I said too, I'm trying to pace it in a way like it would make sense. Like I'm not going to throw like design on day one.
Right. Yeah.
Like you have to know the elements of news and information gathering before we start talking about design. Like that'll
yeah.
be down the road.
That's another question I get a lot is I need to learn this and this and this, and I have to help advisors understand that you're not going to learn it all in 1 week. And I know that it's absolutely overwhelming to look at a yearbook and look at all the things you need to know, but you can chunk it, like learn one thing at a time and just improve one little bit at a time, and then, you know, go from there.
Well, and not to get too much in the weeds, but like if I had a person that only had like a quarter to teach journalism, that's all they had. And then the kids got to go on staff. You're like, all right, elements of news, information gathering, particularly research and interview, inverted pyramid writing, and then if you get to it, like narrative writing, like angle-based storytelling, we can do those things.
Right.
Then if you come onto my staff, I can teach you how to design. I can teach you how to take a photo, because you have the fundamentals of journalism at the core, and all those things are just tools to display those fundamentals.
To tell that story. Yeah.
So writing is a tool, but I think it is the base tool. It's like your hammer. Like it's the one thing you can always rely on in a pinch, but it isn't always the best thing. I mean, I actually teach a whole presentation on why writing, it should be the last thing you think of. But if it's all you have, then write. Like do that, and at least you have something. And then if you can write, which means that you can go and interview and understand what news value is, well, then you can take a photo because you recognize a thing that's newsworthy. It may be a crappy photo, but I can make it better. We can make it better.
Improve that. Yeah, that's part of the learning process, but it's not necessarily the fundamentals. And I think a lot of times when you look at a yearbook in particular, they're like, it's photos and colors, you know, and the writing is so secondary. And I just feel like that's got to be flipped on its head, you know, like that story has to drive the design.
It looks really, really great. Like on the surface, it looks really, really slick. It's super nice. But then you start digging in and you realize, ooh, there's really no substance here. There's nothing of value that 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back and be like, that was my idea. I'm not going to remember it because it's so, I don't know, fluffy or generic. It has to be the storytelling. Because that's, so to me, that's the key, is just knowing where somebody is, being able to sort of cater something to that. And if they don't have a lot of time, like, let's just not worry about all this.
Yeah.
This is not you right now.
Focus on one thing.
Here. Just do this. And then once you can do that, then we can work on other things, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's absolutely fine. I tell my kids, I'm sidebarring here, but when I teach like workshops and I teach a writing class, you're like, okay, let's pretend for a minute, because I usually teach like intro storytelling. I love that. Love setting the foundation. And I'll tell them, okay, imagine if not only was this an intro journalism class, but we were also all on part of the same school, and this was our staff. We were the very first staff ever, and you're all freshmen. And then some administrator came in and said, not only are you learning journalism, but you're also going to be making the school at the same time.
Right.
I said, okay, we could do it. I said, in that first year, our paper's going to be super ugly. This is going to be
it's not a priority.
This is going to be text. We're going to learn elements of news. We're going to learn information gathering. We're going to learn pyramid writing, headline writing, and we're going to have nothing but text. But you know what? It's going to be journalistic. It's going to be solid. Right. Stories are great. Year 2, everybody comes back. Now we already have that. You know what we're going to do? We're going to add photos and well-written captions. So now we have stories. We have great photos and captions. Year 3, that's when we start thinking about design. We start thinking about alternative coverage options and visual coverage. And so now by year 3 to year 4, we have an amazing publication because it's rooted in the fundamentals of journalism. And then we've added some tools that, yes, make it look better and are probably more conducive to readers. You know what? At its core, it's still great journalism. That's the goal. So if you only have a quarter, you're in year 1.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of times teachers in general are perfectionists and we want to do it all immediately and just crank out this amazing award-winning publication. And you look at the award-winning publications and you're like, how the heck do we do that? But you just described a 4-year process. Like that's a long time, but that's absolutely how long it takes to become excellent at something.
Especially if you come from nothing or come from something that's not very good.
Right. Or from
I
a
was
completely
lucky
different
enough.
background. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to inherit a program that was already very, and I had been part of that program for a little while. Like not everybody gets that opportunity. Like, I
Right.
already knew the kids. Like I had been working with them as the associate advisor for a couple of 3 years, so
Hmm.
they already knew me, and I knew the program, and I knew it was a good one. My student teaching, on the other hand, the program shall remain nameless, was horrid. Like they had 3 computers in the room. Only 2 kids knew how to turn them on. Um, yeah, I mean, this is bad, right? And they never were allowed to leave the room. And then I was asked to sort of do journalism in this environment. Like it was, I learned everything not to do. Like
Yeah. Which is
as a,
sometimes a valuable experience too, you know?
it was touch and go there for a minute. And then I, managed to fall into Carmel, and it was like, ooh, well, this is very
Okay, I can
this
do
is not
it.
because I wasn't in high school journalism. I wasn't a journalist in high school. I mean, I would kind of a roundabout way of getting this. It was telecommunications. I was going to be the next man rather.
Yeah.
And I realized when I got into the telecommunications program that the program where I was learning was mostly sales and marketing. I didn't like that, but I liked the storytelling aspect. So,
Right.
so short, I ended up finding journalism and then journalism education. And here I am.
Yeah.
So, but it takes a while for sure.
Right. Okay, well, thank you so much for all of your insight. I know that we just have limited time, so I have one more question for you. Brand new advisor reaches out to you. Hey, I saw your newsletter. What advice do you give them? I mean, I know we've talked about a lot of advice, but just like the next, what do you tell them right off the gate? What do they do?
Like, what kind of question are they? They're just, they see the
I'm overwhelmed
newsletter.
and I
Oh,
don't
I'm
know
overwhelmed.
where do I start?
Okay. Yeah. Take a deep breath.
Yeah.
um, it'll be fine. And then B, don't worry about. Now it's different if you're a yearbook advisor versus a news advisor. We'll say that because in the yearbook, you have a product you have to make. Just focus on the fundamentals. Just focus on the fundamentals. It doesn't have to be free. You can, you had just said it, like, oh, I'm seeing all these really great publications over there. Yeah, those are aspirational, but don't try to be that. Like, be you, be what you do, and always remember. And I think the biggest advice you can remember is that that product is not your product.
Right.
Your product is students. Your job as a teacher is to provide kids with an opportunity to learn. And so everything, even if it's they're flailing about, that's a learning opportunity, right? We're going to learn from that, and you just have to support them and be ready for that. And don't worry if it doesn't look great. Make sure if you're doing the best that you can. Don't give yourself time to be you. Like, don't spend 48 hours, in a row working on something that's crazy. Just remember that it's students that are your product. I tell my kids, I go, look, this highlight that you make, I said, I could not care less about it.
What?
Yeah, you should care about it. It's your product. If you care about it, that's awesome. But for me, it's like a baseline. Like, this is what we're capable of doing right now. But I care about you. I care about you as a student. And so if you're getting to a point where you're comfortable doing something, then it is my job to make you a little uncomfortable. Now that you're comfortable doing this, writing a story, okay, now we're ready. You're ready to try to be a graphic. Oh, but I know, dude, we're going to get there. That's my job, right? Because my product is students. Their product is the product. So that's the advice I would give to an
Yeah,
advisor.
I think that's a great distinction to make, is that yes, it's you can look at the publication and be stressed out about deadlines and all of that, but that is the student's publication, whether you're in a New Voices state or not. It's a student publication, and your job is the students. So I think
we are teaching kids, and we just happen to be using the language of principles. So
yeah,
the advice I would give: deep breath. Don't compare yourself to everybody else. Just do you, but make sure that you always put students first.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and insight. So how can an advisor, do they subscribe to the newsletter? How do they do that?
So I put all of the newsletters on the JEA website. There's a link under the curriculum tab called Free Weekly Lessons. And so every week I've been posting the newest one there. There's also a link to my intro newsletter if you want to find out about it. And then there's also a drop-down tab from there that says weekly newsletter articles. And so for JEA members, if they wanted to go back and look at some of the older newsletters, they click that one, they log in and have access to those. They're downloadable PDFs, interactive PDFs, so they have hyperlinks and things in them. And then I'm also sharing them on a number of social media sites like the Journalism Teachers Group and some yearbook ones. And then also I've been mailing them out to the JEA mentors, and then also the state. So I've been encouraging them to share them.
Gotcha.
They're,
Yeah. Well,
but yeah, the best way is to go to the JEA site and just check it out.
yeah, I was gonna say I'll definitely put the link to the direct spot where you can grab them on the JEA website in the description box below. I'm also gonna send out the link with this email when the video goes live. And then additionally, if you guys have any questions, like your contact info, I think is in there as well. So, you know, the help is there. But if you haven't joined JEA yet, I mean, this is a, you know, shameless plug, I guess. It's the best journalism organization. It's what I call myself as publisher agnostic. Like, it doesn't matter who prints your newspaper, who publishes your yearbook. It's about journalism teachers, and their resources are just invaluable. So if you haven't already joined, go on the website and look at it. And your school district should pay for it. I mean, it's not that expensive even. I think it's $99 a year.
It is, and there's a lifetime membership option too, which if you're going to stick with it for a while, it's not a bad deal. You know, I'm a lifetime member myself, and it's paid for itself tenfold. Yeah, there are a lot of different ways. And then, if, like, for certain teachers, if they are a mentee, then they get a free year membership to JEA, so you can try it out. But yeah, it's definitely well worth the spend.
Totally agree. It's always my first recommendation on all my pages on my site that are like, what do I do? I'm like, go to JEA. Yes. So it's definitely such a great resource. And they also put on their convention with NSPA twice a year. There's just so many other things. So it's definitely well worth looking into. So, all right, join us next week for the next interview. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you there.